Welcome, everyone. I'm thrilled to be with Heather Wise Turtle Harding. Heather is a servant leader. She believes deeply in the power of public education. She's currently the executive director of the Campaign for Our Shared Future. It's a time bound, nonpartisan campaign to defend and promote K 12 public education from political attacks. She spent the last 25 years in the intersection between access to quality K 12 education and racial equity. She has a bunch of degrees, including from our shared alma mater, Heather, at Northwestern, and then also master's and doctoral degrees from Harvard. She's taught middle school, high school for Teach for America. She's had senior roles, including Teach for America Senior Vice President of Community Partnerships, founding Executive Director of EdCORE, senior philanthropic leadership roles at the Gates and Schusterman Family Foundations. Incredible career, Heather. I'm so thrilled you're here. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me and for calling out my name.
Heather, let's start there because names are important and identities are important. So, can you talk to us about your name and why it means so much to you?
Sure. I am, in addition to having grown up in the Midwest in Jackson, Michigan, place that competes to be the birthplace of the Republican Party. Uh, I also grew up and spent my summers in Massachusetts and Cape Cod. And my family in the Cape are members of the Wampanoag tribe. We came to be engaged with the tribe over time, um, like intermittently, but my one of my cousins and my aunt really told the family we've got to be involved in this as the tribe, one, tried to reclaim their language and revive it, but also just more activity around reclaiming land and being engaged. My cousin became the medicine man of the Herring Pond tribe, and the medicine man is the person who gives you your name. And so my cousin named me Wise Turtle. And it's been fun to have people both recognize. I mean, I'm very black, very black. But also part Native American, and I'm really proud of that heritage. And so having that name in a lot of places now gives me the opportunity to share that story. And I spend a lot of time on the Cape in the summers still.
I mean, where I come from shapes so much of ourselves. And to know that and have connections even to this day and to be named by a relative is so powerful and meaningful. And that we can bring all those parts of our identity into our life, our work. So, Heather, can you talk about that shaping of your career? Because you've had such a, I mean, illustrious career. It's like with all the big brands and all the big, schools. And so, how did your identity shape where you are today in that career?
Yeah. So I definitely grew up relatively poor with a single mother. Um, and also, both of my parents attended college, and my father's family was very working class. And because I shuttled back and forth between them, they were divorced early in my life. Um, I had a sense that there was more than just wherever I was that time. I had a sense of travel and worldliness. I think early in life that was really helpful for me, particularly because the Midwest is a really different place than New England, right? Um, I was also like a kid who liked school. I always loved my teachers. I mean, I had some clunkers, but mostly I had teachers who really encouraged me and loved me, like truly loved me. And so I was good at school. So I worked hard at school, and I excelled. I was identified as gifted, using the air quotes, right? And it made a real difference for me because it put me on a trajectory that was really different from my peers. In the second grade, no, third grade, it's always Mrs. Kendricks, my third grade teacher, who I still talk to this day. Um, she referred me to the gifted program. Um, and the educational opportunities that I got became really different. I was the only child in my predominantly black, predominantly low income school that got on the bus and went to the gifted program once a week, right? Like the only one. Um, but I got opportunities to read more broadly, to understand history, to do all kinds of things, and to meet a different group of people. Um, and it made a difference. It was a tremendous difference in my life. Um, and I thought in high school, I love to write. I was on the school newspaper. I decided that I was going to be a journalist. And at the time, Northwestern, our shared alma mater, was like the top journalism school. So that's where I'm going, right? I was going to be a journalist. Then I was going to go to law school, so I could like fight for justice or do something. And I, um, I read about Wendy Kopp and Teach for America my sophomore or junior year. I can't even remember which one in Newsweek because I was a big consumer of media. And I thought, "Ah, I would love to be a teacher, but nobody had ever encouraged me to be a teacher because I was too smart for that. And so I plotted to meet the recruiters of Teach for America their first time out, like 1990 or whatever. I met them as a junior and I said, please come back for me. Like, I'm going to be ready. Uh, and thus, like, I never worked a day in journalism. I went to teach in rural North Carolina, and I wasn't a super great teacher. And so I thought, what other things can I do in the sector to help and support teachers? Um, and that's been my career, like K-12 for the next 27 years.
Their connection with you on the bus, the only kid on a bus,
Yeah.
getting bus to this access, which opened up so much. I mean, your teachers, Mrs. Hendricks, and the exposure, wanting to be a journalist, social justice. I mean, it continues. And so I see how powerful that our roots, if we get exposed to people and ideas and Newsweek, like there's so much that is possible. And so even through these different jobs you've had, I see a clear theme, Heather, of staying close to how can we defend our K-12 education, especially now with all the political stuff going on. So I want to talk
Yeah.
about that, but I also want to just hold because in your investigative journalism, just the way you see things, I know you care about stories. I'm curious if there was a story, if there was a myth that you believed when you were growing up or even ascending in your career that you're like, oh, this is absolutely true, but you realize later, actually, that's false. And the reality is, any myths come up for you?
I mean, the myth of meritocracy is a core one, right? Like, um, I and it does go back to being on that bus. I'm so glad you're reminding me of these stories. Like, um, if I'm the only kid from an entire elementary school who goes to the gifted program, I'm getting on the bus by myself. Nobody else from my school is going. I don't think I'm the smartest kid in the school. Like, I just don't. I think I might be one of the smartest kids, maybe. But I thought, gosh, that's so strange that I would be the only one from my school to be eligible for this program. Um, and that sort of sows the seeds of like maybe this thing about like you work hard and you rise to the top isn't true. Um, by the time I got to college, I knew it wasn't true. But I also knew that class has played really heavily for me. In the fifth grade, I was in a program that was a study abroad program for fifth graders. So I went to France for 3 weeks with the whole class went, and we did an exchange with another class. And it was super instructive because it was such a great opportunity. But it was expensive. So my mom actually, who she was very engaged civically. So she got businesses to sponsor me so I could go. We couldn't afford to do it. Um, but there were other children in the class that could afford to do it. Some of them were Black in my little small town. And I was like, oh, wow, like there are people with resources that they can afford to supplement. And these kids like have just richer opportunities. And I was like, wow, I got to figure out how to do that. As a young person, how do I do that? How do I create more resources for kids who don't have them in the way that my mom was doing for me? But by the time I got to college, it just kept replicating. I kept seeing how financial resources or cultural resources really mattered. Um, and that most people have the potential, they just don't all have the opportunity. So I think it really drove me to say, let me be in education and let me focus on how to make that true for more young people.
Heather, you and I share Northwestern also being bus kids. So there's a lot of resonance there, and also obviously commitment to public education. I'm curious because this idea of meritocracy, right? It's sold as the American dream for my parents who immigrated from the Philippines. There was like the whole idea: we work hard, and then we'll thrive, and then our children will thrive. And you and I both went to great institutions, and so I'm curious because we're now navigating and trying to do this work of having access. And yet, I mean, you went to Gates and Schusterman, not to put people on the spot, but I'm curious because
Right.
now you're navigating with people who do have access. There's the race piece, there's the class piece, and now there's cultural connections. And I did not come with that. So we had to find our way. And so I'm curious because now you're in a place that's political. I mean, this is like the mecca of all the things, and you're like, here I am, and obviously you're amazing, but yet there are people with more connections, and even to our
Yeah.
careers there's a real, not a race, but there's a difference. And so I'm curious how did you navigate that? I mean, think back to younger Heather, right? And you're
Yeah.
like an idealist, take me next year to be on TFA, which you're like the dream person. So Wendy Cup, it's obvious, right, that she would pull you later to be the senior person. But how did you navigate that, not having had those resources to call in, and yet now you're in these very, very prestigious places with people
Yeah.
who have that? Like, what was like I don't know, the cheat code? Like, if you were to think, back when, gosh, here's the thing I did. Here, little young Annalisa, young Heather, here's a faster way to learn that. What is that thing that helps you get access to these, these
Yeah.
privileges?
Well, so I don't know if the code is the right way forward for everyone.
Mm,
So I want to say that up front, but like um being an only or being the sort of token or minority, I do think sets you up to decide about fitting in, assimilating, bridging, or being more of yourself. And so I think early I learned that my role was to be an ambassador. And for whatever reason, my personality, that didn't break me in my personality. It felt like an honor, not a burden. And I think that is really a largely personality driven, but also um, I, I was able to carry it. And so I've been in a lot of situations over my career and in my life where I'm the bridge. And there's a great like womanist feminist collective called The Bridge Called My Back. It's a book of collection of essays, maybe from like the 70s or 80s. I've studied it in college. Um, and I thought, ooh, that is my jam. That Bridge Called My Back. And it's a woman of color collective, the Combahee collective and they wrote all these essays about this experience of women of color having to bridge
mm,
across. This is sort of pre-intersectionality. Thank you, Dr. Crenshaw. But like, um, that resonated with me as an experience. Like, if I can be a good ambassador, then people will understand that others like me belong here too.
mm,
It's a little it's bittersweet, right? Like it's not the best way to move forward. Um, but it did allow me to be in a lot of different spaces. And I think that's why now, as a senior leader, I insist on my ability to be my authentic self. Like I
mhm.
don't show up places without bringing all Heather and what it means now. But it's something I've had to earn, right? Um, so I think that's one thing. The other thing though that like I do think is a useful thing to think about is um if it's uncomfortable, you do have to leave. Like there
Mm,
are spaces where um the requirement of bridging or fitting in or assimilating. I mean, we don't even aspire for assimilation anymore, but I grew up in the 80s and that was like the standard.
yep.
We don't do that anymore. I'm so glad. But you have to leave. And so I think what's lovely about the environment now is that there is an expectation and opportunity to create spaces that are really just for you. You don't have to adhere to the mainstream or the white middle class uh, mode of doing things. So to me, there's more opportunity for young people to move and to create places for that feel authentically for them. That wasn't how I was raised. It's just become more of a thing. And I'm grateful for it.
Heather, I want to go deeper into this concept because it's so powerful to be a bridge builder and have this seen as an opportunity, right? You could come into this space and you're like, great, I'm not the only, not only am I the only woman, I'm the only woman of color.
Mhm.
Here we go. And I'm curious how you think of it. I'm going to give a little bit of context for me, but it's understanding, okay, who am I with and what role do I choose to play in this space? And yes, sometimes it does look like more having to play the game, I'll call it that.
Mhm.
But one, choosing what that I'm going to, one, I'm at choice and that I'm going to choose a role that will work for me. And two, based on that role I'm going to play, I'm going to make sure I get what I need. So in this case, meet granters,
Yes.
and make sure they know my name and that I've connected, but also that I'm going to thoroughly hold my boundaries, right? Like if there
Mhm.
seems to be sometimes someone might say something and you give them the benefit of the doubt, but if there continues to be offensive things said and I'm not willing to engage in that conversation, then I can exit. And so there's a boundary maintenance.
Yeah.
So there is some leaning forward, but also protection, and then knowing when to exit. So I'm curious how you think of it because this is a skill set that we're having to do young and
Yes.
we continue to play. And so I hear you leaning more into now. Well, I'm senior now. It's my organization. It's me, fully me. And please, yeah, please and thank you with the money, right? Like,
Yeah.
so I'm curious, how do you think about it for yourself when you're trying to be a bridge builder as well as maintaining the authenticity? Do you have any steps you take or mindsets that you practice?
Well, I'm trying to remember when I learned this. I also have a story I want to tell, which I think is like important to the work that you do in framing. And that is I I had a senior role at Teach for America. I was the executive director of Eastern North Carolina early in life. I was like 26 years old. And that was just the TFA way, right? Like hire a young whippersnapper, do the work. I left the organization um, after running Eastern North Carolina region, and I went to work in a more traditional institution in Boston because I wanted to go to grad school. And I got hired pretty quickly. Um, and I had a supporting role that was probably more appropriate, I guess, for a 26-year-old. Um, and but I had a lot of skills, and so I did well in the role. And there were two women, one black and one white, who were leading. The black woman was leading the initiative that I worked with, and the white woman led the organization that was there. And I learned so much from them, but they were really hard on me. They gave me a lot of critical feedback. Um, they were always trying to put me in my place. And that's how I felt about it. But I really wanted to succeed and I believed in the projects that we were working on. And I remember the Black woman called me into her office one day, and I guess I was not performing in one particular area up to par. And she really gave me a scolding, but it was all like wrapped in, you need to stay in your place. And I was heartbroken actually to get this feedback. Um, and then later, the white woman who ran the organization called me in and she bolstered me in terms of like, you're like such a amazing young leader, et cetera. But she said about her colleagues' feedback that it was right and that I needed to like figure out how to both play big and play small. And there was a generational moment where those women who were, 20 years my senior were navigating acting like men in the space so that they could be powerful. And they were passing that on to me, who was coming up really in a different time. I didn't feel like my leadership needed to be male centered. And I just said to myself, this has been a great opportunity. And I'm going to stay here until I go to graduate school. But I know I don't want to be a leader in this model that seeks to put people in their place. Because to me, it just perpetuated like all the things that we don't like about the patriarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I couldn't articulate that at the time, but I was 26, 27, really young in my career. And I just made a mental note, like, I'm going to learn as much as I can, but my exit strategy is I'm going to graduate school anyway. I exited that organization in my mind at that time. And I set a goal for myself to leave both gracefully, but also to leave. Like it wasn't gonna be. Um, and I am forever grateful to those two women because their intention was really to like support and train me, but their model was wrong. And so there was a way in which I recognized that, made my mental break. So I couldn't just leave. I mean, I needed a paycheck. Also, there was more to learn. But I think like that orientation has been really great for me. My friends always joke, Heather, you will go and find another job. And I'm hoping one day to have that job that like I want to stay in for 20 years because I got at least that much left in my career. But um, I haven't stayed in places long. It's not because I haven't loved the work of them, but there are those moments where I'm like, this doesn't work for me anymore. I'm gonna exit and do the next thing. Uh, and I really do think it's luck that I haven't been punished for that. But there is something about being in a place that no longer resonates with your values and having both the conviction to leave in ways that don't undermine your livelihood.
I have to say this and double stamp it, Heather, because I see the value in what I'm learning. There is something to learn here, and I'm leaving. Maybe not yet, maybe not at this moment. I want to make sure I'm taking care of myself and my family, but
Yeah,
I have an exit plan because often we don't make that reflective point in our choices.
right.
We just keep suffering, like, oh, it's not that bad. I guess I could see where they're coming from. And then it's like 5 years later, and your soul, right, is just like extracted, and you're living and breathing this toxicity, and then it becomes your norm. And so I love that at that moment you decided and you took care of yourself, learned what you needed to, and headed out to the next thing. Because that's what we don't hear, right? It's like, be loyal, Heather. If you're committed to the movement, to children, you will suffer because it's part of the work. Be in your place. And you're like, oh no, actually, this is not the way. So I love, love,
Yeah.
love that you mentioned that. I want to ask you, Heather, about politics because that is, I mean, come on, it's hard waters already in education, and now you're going into the most shark-filled waters, dare I say. I mean, not everyone is kind, and let's be our authentic, loving, caring, open-hearted selves. Like it is a whole. I'm a wolf, as you know, Kiddos Wolf. and I'm like, it's a pack of wolves out there. And so I'm curious, how do you take care of yourself, given especially the work you do and how you're trying to protect it from politics and all these attacks? Like, how do you balance that in that environment?
It's been hard. And the campaign for our shared future is a time-bound campaign. In fact, we're beginning our wind down now. And I think the reason that I have been able to be in it is because I knew it would end. That sounds crazy. But I think that's true. I've run really fast and hard, because I know it's going to end. I will show you this. I don't know. Okay, so where is it? It's there. I can't. It says fill your cup.
This is Heather's
And
tattoo, by the way, for people who are not watching.
yes, it's a
It's a
tattoo
mhm.
on my inner arm. And I got it last year because I was running so fast and I wasn't taking care of myself at all. And I needed something as a reminder that you've got to fill your cup before you can do the work for anybody else. Um, and there have been mornings when I wake up and look at that, and that's my only reminder to fill my own cup. For me, it looks like sleep. So, it looks like having a massage. I have had the grace of having at least two conservative women who have advised me when the ugliest of attacks have defeated me or felt like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Because our campaign in maintaining our nonpartisan middle ground, we have to work with the other side. Um, and that's been helpful to like have them in my ear, authentically supporting me, but helping me take a different perspective. Um, yeah, and then, I know where my sources of joy come from. My children going to dance, and staying in touch with good friends. And so those are the things that I do. But I never thought I would work in politics, although I'm a great admirer of like politics connected to policy, et cetera. Um, but it did really feel for me like the American democracy project was under great attack, and that this was a way for me to lean into my leadership, to be like, you know, it's not every day that you get the opportunity to be a part of history. And that's what this is. So I was like, okay, Heather, it's your turn. Yeah.
Wow. Wise turtle. I love that so much. It's so wise and so brave and so awesome and so needed. Heather, I am so excited. I'm curious if you're ready with all of this amazing conversation to go into some fun lightning round questions.
Yes.
Ready? Okay. Chocolate or vanilla?
Chocolate, always.
Cooking or takeout?
That's a hard one. It's probably cooking.
Climb a mountain or jump from a plane?
I'm jumping from the plane. I don't need to be on the mountain.
Have you ever worn socks with sandals?
Yes. When it's cold, I don't like the cold. And sometimes you do need a sandal.
How would you rate your karaoke skills on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being Mariah Carey?
So this is my jam. I love karaoke. I have won karaoke contests at the mall. So I'm a 10, baby.
What's a recent book you read?
Oh yeah. Um, I had this. Oh, let's see. What is the most recent book that I read? This is crazy. Oh, yes, no, I know what it is. It's right over there. It's called Walk Through Fire by Sheila Johnson. And she was the co-founder of BET. she and her husband was kind of terrible. She's also one of the first Black billionaires. And now she does incredibly philanthropic work, and cultural work and hospitality. She's part owner of like the Mystics here. Like amazing story about it's a memoir, which I love I love a good memoir. I hope that I get to write mine soon.
And you mentioned many ways of practicing self care. What's your favorite?
It's a massage. I mean, I'm going for one this afternoon. And I started in the pandemic when we were all locked down. You could go to health things, and massage was one of the things that you could go and do, even masked up. And it's a great, like, I started a yoga practice after having my second child that really has sustained me. And this massage work also, I feel like it's both mind body connection, for relaxation and also for being really in tune with what's going on in your body.
What's a good professional development you've done?
Um, let's see. I'll shout out Pahara, which I was a skeptic. I was a skeptic because of the elitism, but it really did aid me in clarifying my purpose, and helping me rediscover and release some of my creativity. Um, there are probably others, but I have a great executive coach, who has helped me do visioning that are really helpful for management. So if you don't have a vision, either for like how your organization is going to operate and what kind of leader you want to be, it's really hard. And I'm not a natural visionary, so my coach has really helped me do that work.
What's your definition of a boss mama?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, all mamas are bosses. It's it's a it's a requirement for the job.
What advice would you give your younger self?
Go abroad more. More often than you did. Like, oh, I wish I had traveled internationally more frequently before I had children. Because you've got to carry them with you, maybe, or find out who's going to care for them while you go gallivanting. Um, but yeah, that's the real thing that I wish I had done more of.
And then where can we find you? Like LinkedIn, anywhere else?
Yeah. Um, so on X or Twitter, I'm Heather HJ, but I hardly ever go there anymore. Uh, and for now, you can find me on LinkedIn. I have a public profile there, but my other social media is locked down because I run this political campaign against extremists who are vicious attackers. And so I am not publicly available on Facebook or Instagram because I like to share with my friends and family photos of my children. So I'm not publicly facing there, but I am on Twitter at Heather HJ and Heather Harding on LinkedIn.
And last question, Heather, do you have a final ask, recommendation, or any parting thoughts to share?
Yeah, I mean, I live and die by this commitment to authenticity. And I think it's important for young leaders, um, to at least consider who they would be if there were no other pressures. Because when you really need to sustain yourself, it's important for you to be true to yourself. So we all can't do that all the time, but you need to be in touch with that. So try it on sometimes, even if you can't do it in your day job, find a space where you can.
Beautiful. Heather, thank you so much for this. I loved this conversation.
Thank you, Annalisa. This was fun.